Welcome into another episode of the Autzen Audibles podcast. It's a Monday. It's time for a mailbag. Continuing our little tour around, I guess, the University of Oregon athletics beat. We bring on Alec Dietz of the Register Guard to jump on this podcast. Usually we'd be talking hoops because we're the primary women's basketball beat writers, but all football today, Alec.
All football. Excited to talk about it. I'm fresh off the trip from New Jersey, fully rested. So yeah, ready to talk about football.
You texted me that you slept in past 10 o'clock, which would be like a record for me.
Yeah,
So congratulations.
it's certainly a lot during the season, but I had to go up through PDX, and luckily I had a direct flight. But I explored New York a little bit, went on the subway, so did all the things, ate a bagel, just the whole thing, the whole gambit.
You're basically a New York native, it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Before we jump into the questions, I did actually want to pick your brain on the game day experience, because you were one of, I believe, two reporters to make the trip, along with James Crepey of the Oregonian, a fan favorite on this podcast. I was curious on the telecast. It was hard to tell, but it looked like there was an awful lot of green in the stadium. Tell me what, I guess, just the SHI stadium experience was like, but also like, what would you estimate in terms of like the number of Oregon fans you saw there?
Yeah, well, first I'll say I'm horrible at estimating numbers. Like I remember at an old job, we'd always like guess how many fans were there, and whoever got the closest, I don't even know what they got, like a pat on the back. But like I was so off every single time. It's so hard for me. So numbers are not, I don't know, being able to predict numbers is not my specialty. But there were a lot of Oregon fans there. There were a lot of Oregon fans on my flight from Portland, going to Newark. Excited about the game. I'm certain there were a lot of Oregon fans that live out on the East Coast that made the trip.
Yeah.
And by basically after that first drive of the third quarter, where I believe Oregon has scored their 7th straight touchdown, there were more Oregon fans there than Rutgers fans. And I'm not even like hating on Rutgers fans. I mean, there was nothing to cheer about for them. Like it was pretty rowdy,
Sure,
pre-game. And most of them, the student section had kind of cleared out to that point. And by the end of the game, when Rutgers was driving there in the fourth quarter and eventually scored a touchdown, it was pretty loud with Oregon fans cheering on the defense and all that. And, by the end of the game, they had all moved down into the, to front row because so many people had left. And it was kind of a sea of green just on one side of the stadium. And that certainly brought a smile to Dan Lanning's face in post game. And, he loves to go and give the fans their props after the games and high five people. And, they made it an emphasis at the team to go and do that. So, yeah, it was, definitely a unique experience just with, it's homecoming for Rutgers. There was a big crowd pregame, but by the end of the game, it was definitely a sizable Oregon crowd. Like I said, I won't give you a number, but it was sizable.
Thousands of Oregon fans were clearly there.
Yes.
And like you said, I don't blame a single Rutgers fan for wanting to go home early.
Yeah.
Oregon fans go home early, and this is going to sound like I'm taking a shot at the fan base. It's not, but like the student section will empty out and Oregon wins by the middle of the third quarter. If your team's losing by 46 points, go find something else to do. It's New York City, or close enough that you can go find something to do. It's a Saturday night. All right, we're going to jump into the questions here. Alec, we're going to do 3 before the break. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and finish up the show. Thank you again for joining us here. Maybe we'll have you on to talk some women hoops at some point here. Maybe once we get that becomes the priority in February or something. All right.
Right.
First, yeah, because it's not right now. I hate to say it.
Yeah. They get it.
They do. The fans absolutely get it. If we did a all women's basketball podcast right now, no one would watch, and those that did would just be commenting about why we were doing it.
For sure.
Right. First question from @Dylan A. Hoffman over on X. Now that we are halfway through the season, by the way, I'm going to remember to do this. Put that up on the screen so we can all see it. What position group needs the most work to help us finish strong, assuming field goal kicking is already on the list? Dylan adds, #Autzen Audibles. Yeah, well, let's get the field goal kicking thing out of the way. How big of a concern is that to you, Alec? Because I will say they've tried 2 kickers now, and they've missed 4 on the season. The last 2 games have missed kicks that have both been under 45 yards. That's a range you expect to be accurate from. Where are you at with that part? And then we'll jump into a position group for each of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in recent weeks, it has become a concern, and it might be cause for changing how Oregon kind of handles being in opposing team territory, right? If you're kind of on that outskirt where you think it's going to be like a 45-yard kick and you're facing, 3rd and 10, maybe you call a run play to make it 4th and manageable so that you can go for it, or you call a play short of the sticks to try to go for it. And Dan Lanning and his staff have consistently been aggressive anyway.
Sure.
They might go for it regardless if they have a really good kicker, right? So I don't really think it changes too much in the way they operate. I don't think it's been catastrophic, and nothing has been like, oh my gosh, this is such a huge problem that you can't even kick at all, right? Like you got to go for it every time and all that other kind of stuff. Because I think Sappington's still 4 for 4 under 30 yards, and he's actually, funny enough, I think he's 3 for 4 from the 40 to 49-yard range, but just has those couple missed kicks from the 30 to 39 range, and then the 50-yard range, and then the Hurich miss from the last game. So it's definitely cause for concern, excuse me, and something that they're going to need to think about. And if it doesn't get kind of course corrected within the next couple of weeks, it certainly could change things. But at this point, I'm not sure it's like a blow everything up kind of thing, try whatever. It hasn't been catastrophic.
Yeah, no, exactly. It hasn't been. I will say it was notable to me that they did make the change there. And of course, it's in a game situation where the backups are already in. I thought Brock Thomas was leading that drive. So I don't think we can suggest Atticus has lost his job. But I did think it was notable that like they had an opportunity to kick a field goal that was within both kickers' range, and they sent Hurich out there. If he would have made that, this would have been like Henry Cattleman all over again, where fans are just clamoring for the kicking change. Unfortunately, he missed it, so he doesn't get to be everybody's hero. And instead, I think everybody's kind of like, oh, they have 2 bad kickers. I don't think they have 2 bad kickers. I'm not sure they have 1 bad kicker, but I also don't know if they have 1 great kicker. And certainly that is not ideal when you're going to be in much more competitive games when the season really ramps up here towards the end of November and into December with postseason play. So wanted to get that part dealt with first. The second part here, position groups. I think linebacker on defense is where I would just shift my focus. The offense now, of course, you could point to a couple different places. Alec maybe has an answer there, but I think Bryce has been probably a little bit below his play last year at times, but overall very productive. Like he's on pace to be over 100 tackles this year. That's not something that's happened with Dan Lanning leading the show. He's had, I think, 4 straight where he's been over 7 tackles. He had 3 in a row over 10, which was the first time in like over 7 years, I think, since that had happened. Yeah. So he's got all the barometers. Play maybe decreased a bit. I'm going basically off PFF grades, which is super stupid on my part. I apologize, but like the production's been fine. The overall play, according to PFF, has dropped a little bit. I don't worry about him. It's the other spot that I'm a little bit more concerned about. Jerry Mixon played great early. I think Devin Jackson's been playing maybe even better than Jerry Mixon the last couple of games. And rewatching the game, I actually thought Devin was pretty solid. But in totality, if you are to nitpick something on defense, it would be the fact that Rutgers converted a lot of short yardage 3rd down plays in this game, a couple on 4th as well, without much resistance. And if you kind of go back and watch, as I did on Sunday night, guy's a little bit slow to react, either out of position or just kind of run through a couple times. I think for me, that's probably the position group to monitor. And I'll also throw out, like, I thought Dylan Williams, a guy we've literally never seen play football for Oregon, I thought he had some really nice moments in the second half there. Maybe that's a new name to kind of throw out. But that's where I would lean in terms of the group that needs to work or to improve. And that's not even to say I think it's like catastrophic, to use your term, with place kicking. I don't think there's like a real like huge issue on this team positionally, but it is for me, it's the weakest unit right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, Dan has been saying all season long, strength in numbers. And the linebacker is the one unit where they can't really afford to rotate a whole bunch of guys there because there's just not that much experience there, right? I mean, you're talking about Bryce, Jerry Mixon, and Devin Jackson as the guys that have experience. And then it's a lot of unknowns there. They don't have as many pieces they can throw at you, especially with the injuries. Braden Platt hasn't played this season, and Dylan Williams is kind of just getting his feet under him. And it was cool to see him flash there because obviously there's potential there for him to be a contributor, and haven't seen much of Kamara Mathuti, if at all. I'm not really sure about what his snap counts.
Super limited snap counts. I'll pull it up while you talk, but yeah, not a lot.
Right. So that's the group that is just sort of the thinnest, and therefore doesn't have as much they can throw at people as other positions, frankly, on the defense or the offense. You look at the secondary and they rotate a lot there. You look at the defensive line, they rotate a lot there. They rotate a lot in the edge group. They rotate a lot at receiver, running back, obviously. So that linebacker group, I'm not ready to call it a weakness because I do think they've played well. But my answer, and I don't know if this answers this question exactly in terms of like this is the group that needs the most work, but I think the group that will determine how far this team goes, especially defensively, is those edge rushers. When they are creating havoc, when they are creating problems, when they are getting pressure on the quarterback, which is basically every game this season except for Indiana, they're holding quarterbacks to 48% passing percentage. Ethan Kaliakmanis, this has been well documented. He was throwing for nearly 300 yards a game, and he threw for 79. They were getting in his face. Drew Aller didn't do anything. Preston Stone didn't do anything, right? And then you look at Mendoza, who, got pressure on him a couple times, but for the most part was able to operate within the offense, get rid of the ball. Not many batted down passes, right? Like I get like their scheme was get the ball out quick, but and I know he's 6'5" too, right? That's easier said than done. It's hard to bat guys passes down, but like that was a really big key in that game. And I think Mateo Uiagalelei and Tatum Tuioti and Blake Purchase, all those guys are just huge down the stretch. They have to impact the game, and that'll determine, I think, how good this defense can be and how far Oregon can go.
Mathuti at 24 snaps on the season, so basically not contributing. I like where you went there. Yeah, I agree. I don't know if it's the group that needs the most work, but it's the group that needs to be most consistently impactful, probably is a way to answer that. Especially like I now look at the last two games in the regular season as big tests for them against USC and Jade Mayaba, who's statistically one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and then Damon Williams, who I think you kind of got to see some of the chinks in the armor there this last week against Michigan. Really, really played poorly down the stretch there. Kind of a game that they were competitive and maybe had a chance to make interesting late, and he threw a bunch of interceptions. Game kind of went the other way. Did not end up being very close. But those are going to be tests where you have to get home. And we saw last year against Washington, they got there a lot. Is that the case again? That's going to be, I think, a storyline down the season. Yeah, let's call it an end there. I mean, we could go on to offensive stuff, but I think we all know like it's quarterback that just needs to be good. And there's a lot of parts there with the offensive line. I just think that's kind of a straightforward answer. I agree. The front seven is crucial for this defense to continue to play at a high level. All right, we're gonna go to this one, which is an extremely long question that I've just condensed to that. I will read the entire question, but I literally didn't have enough characters to fit it for the YouTube.
It'd be blocking our faces.
It would be blocking our faces, and actually it was like 200 characters. I would have had to break it into 3 different text chains, basically. So we're just going to jump to this one from at David Navu. While I haven't been at all surprised to see Dante included in the Heisman talk, I have been surprised at the assumption that he's one and done and then off to the NFL after this year. Wouldn't he be better served in terms of development and prepping for the NFL to stay and play one more year at Oregon, regardless of draft stock? What percentage would you put it on the possibility that Dante will stick around? And if Dante leaves, is Novosad next up? This is like an Aaron Fentress, multiple questions here. Just hog the microphone. Let's get 4 in from David. I appreciate it. There are 3 questions here, so I guess we can take them one at a time. The first part, I don't disagree with the premise that Dante, who's 20 years old, by the way, it gets overlooked. This is a third-year college player he's not even of legal drinking age yet, much less somebody who like can do a lot of the adult things that you need to do as an NFL professional athlete. So I do understand that part. I'm also never going to lecture a kid who is being told he could go make millions and millions and millions of dollars. By the way, he's already making millions of dollars here, but more millions at the next level from doing that. But I do think he's going to have some big questions to answer throughout the rest of the season, because we saw against Indiana what happens when he's not comfortable in the pocket. We've seen now against Rutgers and obviously all the games prior to Indiana what he looks like when he is comfortable. And the answer is, if he could just do that every game in the NFL, he'd be making a ton of money. His team would never lose. It would be super fun. Everybody would feel good. I just have watched some NFL games recently where the defenses impact the quarterback shockingly, and the quarterback play isn't quite as good. Most recently, well, there's a lot of quarterbacks who that Tua Tagovailoa is somebody I've watched just like kind of deteriorate. Justin Fields deteriorate. Even Justin Herbert had a really hard time this last game against the Colts. That part to me just is stuck in the back of my head. So whether it be Iowa or probably maybe a team in the college football playoff, somebody is going to throw more at him, and it's going to make it difficult for him to kind of go through his progressions and just pick apart defenses like we saw this most recent game and what I thought was his best and most impressive performance to date. So I think I want to see those questions answered before I have a real answer of like, what do I think about his decision to stick around or not? Like if he struggles against Iowa and they get eliminated from the college football playoff early against a team that just does a lot of the same kind of things or is a little more disruptive, then I think you can absolutely have kind of you can make the pitch that, hey, you need to come back and sort through how to have a little better pocket presence, how to handle some of this better, because that has to me been the one area that I'm concerned with that translates to the next level.
Yeah, I agree totally there too. I think the other thing you got to look at is he's going to be going, I mean, right now they're talking about him potentially being the number 1 overall pick, or at least a top 5 pick. And the team that is probably going to hold that number 1 pick is the New York Jets. Do I want to leave a really stable situation? And for all the talk about Oregon this season being ahead of schedule, next year is when they are on schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if people who stay or are supposed to stay, and maybe they pick up a couple other transfers, and I mean, next year has the chance to potentially be incredibly special. So if and again, I'm not Dante Moore. I'm not speaking for Dante Moore. This is just where my head would be at. The odds of wanting to go to the Jets versus maybe coming back and competing for a national championship at Oregon and also still getting paid pretty heavily. It's a tough decision. I do think it's a tough decision, right? Because the NFL is a dream for all these guys, right? Like that's where you want to go. That's where you want to make it. And you got to strike when the iron's hot too, because maybe he comes back and suffers an injury and something like that could happen, right? So all these things are things he has to sort through. But I do agree with you that I think it depends on a lot on how this season ends too. I mean, say they go and win out and win the school's first ever national championship. I think it would be hard to come back in that scenario. You're kind of ending on the highest possible note. So all those things will play into the factor, and it's early kind of to make a call on whether it's the right or wrong thing to do.
And in terms of the next questions here, I think to me, it feels like a real coin flip. I'm going to be kind of lame here and just say, I think it's 50-50 right now, what he does. I don't really have a feel one way or the other, in part because like Dante is very soft-spoken, and frankly, it's not the time to ask him where his head is at. Those questions will come in December. So like, I haven't heard anything directly from him. You hear rumblings about what the NFL draft projections say, and that makes you think, oh, he should definitely go pro. I think he's also proven to be patient, right? That was like the big storyline about 2024, not rushing to become a starter somewhere. Who's to say he's not willing to be patient another year and put himself in a position where he knows he can go out there at the NFL level and succeed even more. I mean, because again, look at the quarterback who just went number 1 overall in this last draft, Cam Ward, having a terrible time at the NFL level. They're not winning games. He doesn't look good. They're simplifying the offense. If you're Dante, assuming good health, I'm knocking on wood here because that's the part you have to worry about. What really gets in the way from 2025 as opposed to 2026 for making that decision, especially when you have 2 years of eligibility left. You want to hazard a percentage guess here, Alec? Do you have anything?
I just think it's too early. Like you said, it's kind of like it's a December thing, right? You see how the regular season goes. You see what the numbers look like. You see where he's at in the Heisman race if he is in the mix, and that's when the players have time to actually sit. They'll say they're not thinking about it, but they are thinking about it in December. There's too much time passing between games for them not to be like, oh, I need to start thinking about, what I'm doing after this. And that's not to say they're not focused on the bowl prep, but again, there's too much time for these guys not to be thinking about it in December. But I would say 50-50 too. I think even if they go and win and make a deep run, there's a case to be had. He should come back for another year. He's 20 years old, right? Like he could use another year. The quarterbacks that succeed in the NFL in their first year, the Bo Nixes, right? The Jaden Daniels were all really experienced college players. And the ones that have kind of been struggling were the ones that maybe weren't as experienced. And even the experienced ones, like you brought up Cam Ward and Caleb Williams, certainly had a lot of success, struggled. Yeah, I think there's cases to be had for both, and we just kind of have to see how the rest of at least the regular season plays out, and it kind of gets closer to decision time.
The third question, or third part of David's question here, I'm going to just roll over to the next question because I think it's just kind of a natural transition. This comes from @CCoach9. Can you speak about the backup quarterback rotation and depth chart? Is Autzen Novosad still injured? Well, we both know what the availability report says, Alec, and it says he's not on it since, I think, Northwestern. So it seems to me he's available, quote unquote. This is one of the more curious things going on with this program. And I will say, I posted this over on our site Saturday night, as this was like the main topic on our message board. I said, life's pretty good when the big debate right now is what's going on with the backup quarterback and why is the local kid from Sheldon seemingly the number 2? I guess first thing, what did you see? Like, did he look like he could like throw a football? And like, I'm talking about Autzen now. Did he look like, from your vantage point, like he was available to play in this game?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He warmed up just like normal. He was throwing on the sidelines before every drive, like all the quarterbacks do. He totally clear, totally ready to go. I think this is just like this is something Dan Lanning has done in his time, right? I mean, even last year, and I know they were trying to get Dante that red shirt, so that's maybe why a lot of that was happening to preserve that. But when DG came out, sometimes it was Autzen Novosad, sometimes it was Dante Moore, right? Like Oregon hasn't yet had to put in their backup quarterback out of necessity yet this season. So I don't think we can make any judgments about who's the number 2, who's the number 3, what is this offense going to look like, right? I mean, I believe Autzen Novosad's the number 2 quarterback. I believe if Dante Moore got hurt, knocking on wood, that Autzen Novosad would be the guy that trotted out there. I wonder if maybe there is a lingering injury issue where technically he's available, but maybe he's still dealing with something related to an injury. Certainly Dan wouldn't tell us if we asked about any lingering injury issues. But I just think this is one of those things. I agree with you where things are probably going pretty good if the fans are trying to figure out the backup quarterback situation when also your quarterback had arguably his best performance of the season.
Things that will be asked tonight in about 4 hours when we recording this is what's going on here, and then it's up to Dan to be as transparent as he chooses to be. I think it's notable that, like, if you go through the games where the backup has gotten in, you go back to Montana State, Autzen got the first nod, then it was Moga, then it was Brock. Against Oregon State, it was, I believe, Moga, Brock. Against Oklahoma State, Moga, Brock. Oregon State, just Brock, and then Rutgers, just Brock. So it seems like it's trending in the Brock direction. I don't really have a clear read if that means very much. Now, one thing I will say, because I keep getting this kind of popping up, the redshirt stuff is not at play for any of these quarterbacks we're talking about. They've all used redshirt years. The only thing that could, in theory, be play, and I've seen this mentioned before by a couple people, is are they perhaps working on an Autzen Novosad medical redshirt year? I think if that's the case, he needs to be on the availability report every week is out, though. The fact that he's been removed from that, to me, suggests that he's not injured, or at least they're signaling to the opponents and to the Big Ten front office that he's not injured. So I would be confused if you could petition for that. I guess if he doesn't play the whole rest of the season, you can say something was lingering, it came back. But I find the fact that he was questionable to out to back questionable to then out, or sorry, to not on it at all, to suggest he's available. It's a lat injury. Maybe things are wonky there. I've never hurt my lat and tried to throw a football. Two things I don't do very often. Never hurt my lat. I've hurt my brain, my knee, all sorts of things in the last couple of months. Lat's not one of them. And then definitely would not try to throw a football in that case. But I imagine it makes things difficult. So maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe it's as simple as Brock Thomas, who's been in the program along with Austen, as long as anybody has really taken some steps and is actually, quote unquote, the number 2. I don't know. I will say he's had some okay moments. He threw a pretty good ball against Rutgers. I don't think he's like an absolutely terrible player. It seems to be that a lot of the fan base just thinks he's awful. I don't know if that's the case. I will be very curious to see how, in what way Dan answers a question about this situation later this evening, because he could come out and possibly say, no, Brock Thomas is our number 2, and that kind of ends the conversation, or he can do his normal thing and talk about how jobs are always open and no one knows one way or the other, and or they have stuff to earn it, and then we're all just kind of continuing to have this conversation until Saturday's game against Wisconsin, where we wait and see who comes out in the third quarter there.
Right.
Do you have anything else on this? It's a weird one.
Yeah, it is just sort of a weird situation. I could see it. I mean, again, Dan has preached the strength in numbers thing all year long, right? Like it could just be fitting into this strength in numbers thing. Look how many quarterbacks we can trot out there and can compete for this team and win for this team and have success with this team, right? Like, I don't know. Until, by necessity, Oregon has to put another quarterback out there that's not Dante Moore. I just think it's hard to read into any of this. I mean, they rotated every single position, and apparently, in crunch, or not in crunch time, in mop up duty, quarterback is the same situation.
We have spoken to that. That's what we've done. I don't know if we've answered the question sufficiently or given really any sense, but I don't really know I don't have anything else to say, unfortunately, on the matter. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do the last 2 questions on this week's Mailbag podcast, and then we'll send everybody on their merry little way. All right. Welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. 3 questions in, a couple more to go. We're going to go to this one here. This will be kind of a fun little conversation about offensive line play, spurred on by John 04131. What was the snap count for Harkey at right tackle versus guard? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you, John. This was a notable little shift here from Alec Dietz, Oregon's offensive line coach, to invert their guard tackle situation, moving Harkey from tackle to guard, taking Iuli off the field and putting Janoris Wilson at right tackle. They did this, I believe, on the second drive of the second quarter, and throughout the rest of the first half. Offense was pretty seamless regardless of who was playing offensive line in this game. So I can't really tell you like, hey, they're going to make a long-term change, or like, oh, it really worked. It seems to have really shifted the narrative or turned things on its head. But I will say it was notable they went to it, and it was notable that like I thought the offense looked fine when Janoris was at right tackle. In terms of what the actual snap counts are, I'll grab that because that was the question. 30 at right tackle, 10 at right guard. Wasn't a huge sample size, but to me it was notable. I think everybody knows Dave Iuli has probably been the weak link of those starting 5. So finding a way to maybe strengthen that side a little bit makes sense. I don't know. What did you think? And was there anything you noticed watching it live, or any indication from just SHI of kind of what to make of that?
Yeah, I think, Dan was asked about that after the game and kind of said, as he kind of typically does, I'm paraphrasing, but just that they always want to work off on different multiples, so they get prepared for different situations. And I think that was just hey, if we have someone go down on the right side of the line and we need to make an adjustment, right? Let's throw Janoris out there. This game is completely out of reach, and get him some reps, and maybe this is what the line looks like if Iuli gets hurt or even Harkey gets hurt and they have to make an adjustment there. I really think it was just sort of like let's see what we have here. They rotate all throughout fall camp, all throughout spring ball. They talk about how they play just about every single position, and move throughout. And I think they had a good chance to do that in this game against, I believe, Rutgers starting unit was still in at that point.
Yeah,
So, you can get real reps against, granted, there's no way to put this nicely, but that Rutgers defense is very bad. So,
I
maybe
think
you're not
Alec,
getting
you did actually put that more nicely than you could have, actually.
probably. So maybe you can say something that he didn't actually get tested, but that's a power forward defense. So you put him
Sure
out
is.
there and get him some reps and see how it looked. And I think, like you said, the offense moved the ball just fine with him in there. And he's a guy that's been in the program for a long time, and Harkey, getting him some reps inside could pay dividends down the line as well. So I think it was just sort of a long play for the future.
I will say on the Harkey part, I think guard is where he plays at the next level. I think he's been serviceable at tackle and at times like really dynamic in the run game. Still kind of curious, especially coming off the Indiana game and even against Oklahoma State. Like the one sack they'd given up was just kind of a speed rush right by him at tackle. Is a little bit stiffer, maybe just lacks the quickness compared to like an Isaiah World and some of these offensive linemen Oregon has been fortunate enough to have at tackle. So from just like a positional fit perspective, Harkey at right guard lines up. I don't know if I think for sure that's an upgrade. I think Harkey at right guard is probably an upgrade over Dave Iuli at right guard. I don't know if Janoris Wilson at right tackle is enough of an upgrade to make this make sense long term. So I would be very curious. I agree with you, Alec. Probably more than anything, it's just like, hey, we're up 28-3 right now. This game, there's like 40 minutes to play still. Let's just kind of mess around and do some other things. It'll be really interesting to see, though, if this becomes a reoccurring thing. And I wouldn't be surprised necessarily if it does, because I'll get into some Wisconsin talk this week, but this is like just an absolutely atrocious team that hasn't scored a touchdown in 12 quarters. So since the first quarter against Michigan was the last time they scored a touchdown, and they played 2 other full games since then. So that game will give, I think, Oregon a lot of opportunities to tinker with some things and find some solutions for future problems. But that is, I'm happy that was brought up, something worth talking about, because it was a sneaky kind of small little thing here of, hey, in the middle of this game, they actually made a couple changes in the offensive line. And it wasn't because Iuli was hurt, because he then ended up playing the whole second half at right guard, which needs to be said. This was a first half 2-drive thing where they played him for about 10 plays together. And then it went back to Iuli and Harkey over on the right side. Okay, we're going to finish this up with a question from at LBDuck22. He says it's a fun question. I like fun questions. Do we see Oregon play out similar to Ohio State's last year in regards to winning out and eventually playing Indiana in a rematch in the college football playoff? And would we be favored and ultimately win that game? Well, obviously we're not going to have like I am Skopil Damas, so maybe I should be able to do a better job at this. I wouldn't be surprised to see these teams match up in the playoffs, because I do think Indiana and Oregon are both going to be in the playoffs. Super hard to know if these teams will end up rematching. It's going to come down to if these teams end up on each other's side of the bracket, if they win certain games. Don't expect that they would play in the opening round game. It's fully possible Indiana and Ohio State, if these are the 2 teams that win out in the regular season, that even the loser of that gets a bye game. Like, I don't think that's totally outside the realm of possibilities. Remember, they've changed it from last year. Oregon fans don't need to be reminded, which I think is a more suitable way of just like, hey, these are the 4 best teams. They don't have to play. Right. So I do think it's absolutely possible that these teams meet in the playoff. I also think it's very likely Oregon wins out. Like if and I guess that's the component here that needs to be addressed. I just did my ranking the upcoming games in terms of difficulty. There's not really one that leaps off the page as being super scary. Iowa barely beats Penn State at home. USC is on the road again and looks terrible again, compared to what they look like at home, at least, right? And they lose to Notre Dame. They don't score in the fourth quarter. Washington, I already mentioned it. They had a really awful time there. Minnesota, like, actually playing pretty well, but they also have played 1 team with the pulse, or 2 teams with the pulse this year, and gotten just drilled. So I guess, I don't know if you want to say drilled, but they lost to Cal by 2 scores and absolutely obliterated by Ohio State. So I think Oregon probably does win out. I do think that was a necessary wake-up call. Do you have? I mean, do you agree? I guess I'll ask you. Do you agree that you think that they'll win out from here the last 5 games, or do you kind of think, hey, there's some lingering stuff that one of these teams can kind of take advantage of?
I think they're going to win out. I think if you look at how, like, we have enough sample size now to see how these teams are going to look. I think preseason, I thought that Minnesota Iowa stretch could be just kind of tricky, right? You go to Iowa, that's a tough place to play. I don't care how good or bad they are.
Mm-hmm.
If they're a tough team to play, and it's like typical Big Ten on the road. It's reeks of like the Wisconsin game last year, right? So all of that could happen. And then you have a short week and you have to play Minnesota, who every single season gives some top ranked team trouble. Every single season they do it. Maybe they don't win, but they give them trouble. So I think in that stretch, I had them losing preseason, but kind of just like to your point, looking through how these teams have performed so far, Oregon is better on paper than every single one of these teams. So I think they win out, and it's really a matter of like, where does Ohio State stumble along the way? Does Indiana stumble? I mean, Indiana and Oregon could play again in the Big Ten championship if Ohio State stumbles, right? Like that rematch could very much be a thing. So yeah, I think Oregon is well suited to finish their regular season 11-1, and then just kind of see where the chips fall from there.
And then to the final part of the question, I think Oregon actually probably would be favored on a neutral, assuming both these teams win out or look impressive down the rest of the schedule. Because again, they're not gonna meet in the college football playoff if they both fall apart. Especially Oregon, I think, can take maybe one more loss and sneak in. It really would depend against two. Their resume doesn't have a whole lot of firepower behind it at this point with the way Penn State has played, and again, some of these teams kind of upcoming in the schedule, dropping some games. Indiana obviously can lose a game, especially if it's to like Ohio State, and still even be a bye team. Like I said, they could probably lose twice depending upon how it plays out. But I do think like Oregon was 6.5, 7.5 point favorites with that closed against Indiana.
Yeah.
You give 3 points for the home field. You put that on a neutral. That means that the lines were thinking this was like a 3 or 4 point Oregon favorite. Perhaps. I don't know if they win. I'm certainly encouraged by what we saw last game. I saw some people in the comments of our Saturday post-game show with Jackson that I did, being like, "Oh, you guys have just moved on from all the Rutgers thing and just sweep all that under the rug, or from the Indiana thing and swept all that under the rug." It was Rutgers, and that's a very fair point to make. It was Rutgers, and it was a game where they completely overmatched the opponent. We'd seen that in pretty much all their games leading into Indiana, with the exception of Penn State, just being so much more talented, better equipped for the moment than the opposition. Not all the Indiana stuff isn't completely gone. I'd like to think that Dante Moore will be better equipped, and that some of the stuff that Indiana threw at Oregon, in that game, that they'll have had some time to kind of work through and figure out some counters, because we know from an in-game perspective, it didn't look like they did. You like to think that they'll have a more even game plan, coaching kind of, however you want to measure that, going into this rematch theoretically. But I'm not going to sit here 12 days, 10 days, whatever is removed from Indiana coming to Autzen and say Oregon is absolutely going to beat them if they play again. Do I think it's possible or plausible? Sure. I think these teams are still, I mean, it was a tie game in the fourth quarter. People forget that part. I think they kind of speed through it and go, Indiana just waxed them. Indiana still struggled to score points in this game. Oregon had a really hard time with some things that Indiana threw at that it hadn't seen all season. I happen to think that game would be very, very interesting in a rematch, but favored, yes, not ready to say they'd certainly win that game.
Yeah, I think, it's so hard to predict odds makers because, so much of their job is trying to get people to bet rather than placing like a line on how they think it's going to happen sometimes.
True.
Right. Do I think Oregon should be favored? They're more on a neutral field. They're more talented. They have a proven track record. But maybe the odds makers say, hey, Indiana won that game at Autzen. Maybe they give them a couple points. But either way, I think that if that rematch happened, it would be within a couple points of each other. It'd be Oregon favored by 3, it'd be Indiana favored by 2, or it'd be almost a deadlock. I think those teams proved, like you said, it was a tie game in the fourth quarter. I mean, they were pretty evenly matched. Oregon got outcoached down the stretch, and certainly would have to make adjustments. And Dante Moore would have to be better, and the pass rush would have to be better. All those things, but there's no reason to suggest that they couldn't do that. And the other key thing is Evan Stewart. We don't know if he's coming back, right? It hasn't been ruled out. But Evan Stewart provides a totally different dimension in that offense. He totally does. If he comes back to the level that he was, like that, DeCorian Moore has been fantastic. He's been a true number one receiver. He has been consistent, plays like he's a fifth-year senior. But adding in the deep threat that Evan Stewart is into that offense and giving them a number one receiver to then pair with DeCorian Moore really changes that offense. It really does.
That's a really good point that I would have just completely glossed over. Is Oregon, in theory, by the time they play in December, in theory, because Dan has not been committal in any way, shape, or form, and it's really not, to the local media at least, is completely shaken off that question. I know he has given some reports to national media suggesting that it's in play. But if Evan Stewart is available for that game, that's a totally different Oregon offense from a passing perspective than what it was this last time out against Indiana. That's a good point there from Alec. All right, we've already run past time. I've got something else to do in 5 minutes, so we need to wrap it here. Alec, this has been a blast. Thank you for jumping on for your debut on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Like I said earlier in the show, let's try to get on and talk some women's basketball at some point once that's the focal point. That's not the case right now. This has been the Autzen Audibles podcast. Talk to you later, folks.